All right, let's review together. There I am. As always, you should do it first, and then you should check the video to see if you did it right. So all of these are going to be factoring, and I don't know if there's some that we're going to have to create a list, but let's see. So if I'm going to factor, I got to take the first number times the last number. That's negative 12, negative 4. Two numbers that match here. So it's negative 6 times 2, and then I'm going to write down x minus 6 and x plus 2. Then I'm going to divide by that first number. So because I'm finding the zeros, I then can take each factor, so 6 divided by 3 is 2, make it equal to 0, and solve it. Now this fraction I'm not going to slide, so when I solve the first one, I'm going to add 2, so 2 is a 0. And then that fraction, it'll clear up. There it is. I'm just going to subtract that number to the other side. So it's negative in the same number. And that's it. And we know that factors and zeros have opposite numbers, right? They're inverses. All right. Two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 10. And then once we factor it, the zeros are negative 2 and negative 8. This is called a difference of squares. So 1 is going to be adding, and 1 is going to be subtracting. So again, make it equal to 0 and solve. So if I'm going to solve this, I'm going to subtract 5, and then divide by 3. So negative 5/3 is 1. The second one's going to be like the same, except the sign is different. So we're going to add 5 and divide by 3. So the answers are negative 5/3 and positive 5/3. All right, we're going to factor out a greatest common factor here. That's 3x squared. And that leaves me with 3x minus 5. I'm going to take each factor equal to 0 and solve it separately. So you can divide by 3, you can square root it, but at the end of the day, x equals 0 for this equation. Here we're going to add 5 and then divide by 3. So those are my answers, 0 and 5/3. Here we have 4 terms. So I'm going to look at the first two and factor out an x squared. And when I look at the last two, they have a negative in common. So I'm going to factor out a negative 1 and be left with x plus 1. So they share x plus 1, and x squared subtract 1 is what's left in front. X squared take away 1 is a difference of squares. So you're going to square root x squared and square root 1. So you get x plus 1 and x minus 1. Now we already have an x plus 1 there. So we can write this as x plus 1 squared x minus 1. So we don't write down negative 1, negative 1. There's just 1 0 there. It's negative 1 and positive 1. And those are the two numbers that make the equation 0. All right, it's already factored. So the first factor, the 0 is 1. The next factor, the 0 is negative 5. And the last factor, the 0 is negative 3. Right? Take the gimme. Take the easy one. All right, let's keep practicing. Again, you should do it first. 7 times 2, and then 15. Two numbers that multiply to 14 and add to 15. So we have x plus 14 and x plus 1. Divide by 7. So when I divide by 7, I get x plus 2. Divide by 7, and I get 1/7. Again, I'm not going to slide the denominator because I'm looking for the 0. And then subtract 2. Subtract 1/7, and that's it. So it's negative 2 and negative 1/7. We have 4 terms here, so we're going to factor out x squared and be left with 2x minus 3. Factor out a negative 4, and you have 2x minus 3. So we have 2x minus 3, x squared subtract 4. This is a difference of squares, so square root each term, and you get x plus 2x minus 2. And then each factor has a 0. So this factor might be the trickiest one. Make it equal to 0. Add 3 to both sides. Divide by 2. And so you have 3 over 2, negative 2, and positive 2. All right, one more to factor and try. See if you can factor this. Be careful. So it's not 6 and 4. So negative 12 times 2, and they add up to negative 10. So what are the zeros here? So if x minus 12, the 0 is positive 12. Opposite numbers make 0, and that's negative 2. Good job. Number 2, you should try it first, right? So this is just end behavior. So the leading term is negative 2x to the 5th. So I see it's negative with an odd exponent. That means the right end goes down and the left end goes up. And how we write that, notice the beginning part of the end behavior there. So as x approaches infinity, excuse me, the right end goes down. As x approaches negative infinity, the left end goes up. So fill out the end behavior statements. Try it again. Again, you try. Put down the leading term. What do you notice about it? It's positive with an even exponent. So both ends go up. Here, you can put it right here if you like. Both ends go up. And then how do I write that? So as x approaches infinity, the right end goes up. As x approaches negative infinity, it goes up. So the right end goes up and the left end goes up. All right, now some graphing. So this is factored already, but we don't have the expanded form. So when it's factored, the zeros should be obvious. So negative x squared, if you solve that equation, x equals 0, the exponent is even, which means it's going to bounce. The next one, what makes the next factor 0? Positive 2. The exponent is odd. So at 2 it's going to cross. The last one, what makes the last factor 0? Negative 1. It has an even exponent. So again, it's going to bounce. Next, these will be at the end. What's the leading term? This one's a little tricky. So do you see negative x squared? Then it's times x. And then times x squared. So we take every power term and multiply it all together, and you get negative x to the 5th by adding all the exponents. 2 plus 1 plus 2. And it's negative in front. So because it's negative x to the 5th, the end behavior, as x approaches infinity, the function goes down. As x goes to negative infinity, the function goes up. We go in opposite directions. The y-intercept, when it's in factored form, you got to plug in 0. So if I plug in 0, 0 times any number, 0 times, the answer is going to be 0. So let's put this on the graph, and then we can find the turning points. So we have 0, we have 2, we're doing it right. We have 0, we have 2, and we have negative 1. This part here is going to be a little tricky, but it's okay. So this goes down to the right, and it goes up to the left. Now I'm going to fill in the point here at 1. So I'm going to use synthetic substitution to fill in at 1. What did I do wrong? Yeah, fill in at 1. but I can't use synthetic substitution because it's in factored form. So I actually have to do it the old-fashioned way. I got to plug 1 in and do the work to see what the answer is. So I plugged 1 in, and I got -1, I got -1, and I got 2 squared. And if I multiply that all out, I get 4. So 1 gives me the answer 4. So I know it crosses at 2. I know it bounces and then bounces again. Now that's a fraction, so it's going to be a small number. So it here, and it bounces and that. So I'm not even going to plug in -1/2. I know it bounces and then it bounces again and then it goes up to the left. So what would the turning point be? So we have a high turning point here at 1 and 4. I have a low turning point down here at 0, 0, and another low one at -1, 0. And then it's going to estimate this one at 1/2 and 1. -1/2, I should say, and 1. So it's just a little bounce with a little fraction. I'm not going to spend the time putting in a fraction. I see it's a little answer, a little bounce. So the approximate answer is at -1/2 and 1. All right, let's try this again. And this will be our last one, then I'll do a second video. So the zeros are at +2. The exponent is odd, so it's going to cross. Next is at -1. The exponent is even, so it's going to bounce. That's it. The leading term is x times x squared. So if I add the exponents going across, that's x to the 3. So as x approaches infinity, the function goes up. As x approaches -infinity, the function goes down. The y-intercept, if you plug in 0, it's 0 subtract 2, and 0 plus 1 squared. That is -2 times 1, which is -2. And now we can start our graph. So I'm going to find 2 and -1 and -2. And I know it goes up to the right and it goes down to the left. Again, we have an empty point at 1. So again, I have to do this the old-fashioned way because it's factored. So plug in a 1 for x and solve it. So that's -1. 1 plus 1 is 2. And square it. So altogether that gives me -4. So at 1 is -4. And then connect this together. And the graph is finished there. So you can see that it bounced at -1 but crossed over at 2. We have a maximum here at -1, 0. And we have a minimum here at 1 and -4. And that's it. All right, there's part 1. Part 2 is coming up again, different video. Mr. G Math over and out. I'm proud of you for studying for your exam. Until next time.